Alright guys, so welcome to week 2 of Culinary Math. So the first week I basically just wanted you guys to brush up some basics. I'll go over the homework if need be, if I see that we need to brush up on some of the basic math equations. But for this week I wanted to jump into kind of the meat of culinary math, and this is to me one of the most important things, is kind of starting to memorize the customary units of measure when it comes to cooking. Why is this important? When you are maybe working in a restaurant setting, and a lot of times equipment is kind of all over the place, and it's not ideal of you're not always going to have a 1 cup measure, you're not always going to have a gallon measure, so it's kind of important to be able to convert those recipes, or even if you're doing cocktails or anything like that. It's not necessarily just for cooking, but to be able to visualize and to work with what you got is kind of what happens a lot in professional kitchens. So this, if anything, is what I want you guys to take away from culinary math. So basically here we have standardized kind of measuring equipment. So here we have nested measuring cups. That's usually what you have at home when you have the 1 cup measure, half a cup measure, fourth of a cup, sometimes eighth of a cup, and they kind of like stack within each other. Those are typically used for measuring dry, like we learned last week. Here then we have the graduating measuring cups. A lot of times this was what they look like in professional kitchens, and there's not usually an indication of measurement by wording, so you kind of just go by the lines here. So usually you can tell, like, this is a quart because each line is representative of a cup. So then once you learn that there's 4 cups in a quart, then it kind of makes it easier for you to pick out equipment within the kitchen. Here's is kind of more of a standard liquid measuring cup with the measurements written on it on either side. Usually sometimes it's in metric, and then the other side it's standard. But they usually go 1 cup, pint, quart, gallon, stuff like that. Then we have other measuring things. Ladles. Most people may not consider that to be a measuring standard, but each ladle usually has a marking of how many ounces is in each ladleful. So say you're portioning out a soup or a sauce, you can confidently just measure within the ladle, and that is measured. Then you have measuring spoons. Measuring spoons, of course, can be used for liquid or dry, usually in the smaller amounts. A lot of times in professional kitchens, that's, for me, in my experience, those are what go missing first. So sometimes you really need to be on it with your math of maybe you need 3/4 of something and you only have a quarter measuring half or a quarter of a teaspoon, and you have to be able to multiply and figure those things out. So the way these work, so this is a scoop. They're called portion scoops. They come in a wide variety of sizes. They're used for portioning, but they're also numbered. So the number corresponds with how many scoops it would take to make up a quart. So if it is a number 30, it would take 30 scoops to make a quart. A lot of times they're also marked by sometimes ounces, or how many ounces fills each little scoop. So that's another way to measure. Here's a couple different types of scales. We've gone over this. So this is a spring scale or a portion scale. That's usually I would probably use this if I was measuring ground meat, meatballs, meat. If I need like a 4-ounce measure, if I'm just portioning everything out, it's kind of quick. You can layer a piece of plastic wrap or parchment on top of that and continue on your way. Then you have your digital scale. That's most commonly used. I prefer a digital scale. I actually have one separate in my kit, but again, because that's another thing that goes as a popular item, so you want to make sure you can always use it. And you can just change whatever kind of unit of measure you're using. You can switch from ounces to pounds to grams. I find it to be the most versatile. And then you have a balance beam scale. Again, that is usually used for really high weights of something. This is probably less commonly used in a professional kitchen. It's kind of old school. And then starting to visualize. I think it's important when you are converting recipes to kind of visualize it. Because otherwise it'll help you make more sense of it. So if 1 cup equals how many tablespoons, when you get this outrageous number, you can kind of if you can visualize it, you can kind of spot when you might have been making a mistake. So here we have 16 tablespoons because that equals 1 cup. So that visually it looks like this looks insane. And if you're in a professional kitchen, if you start doing the math and you have a recipe that maybe you've used at home, but then you have to multiply it because you're now making it for a catering event or something really large scale, it would take you forever to measure out 16 tablespoons. So converting that into cups would be super beneficial, because instead of measuring out 16 tablespoons, I just have to do 1 simple scoop into a measuring cup. So then again, so we're visualizing. So you walk into the kitchen and someone tells you that they need 2 cups of something measured out, and you can only find a 1 cup measure. Obviously, again, you just do 2 of those, but visually you can kind of see here that this is 2 of these will fit into that gallon, or this 2 cup measure rather. And then here we have 4 cups, 4 individual cups. This would fit into this container, and that is equivalent to, these are quarts. We have 4 quarts, and that would fit into 1 gallon. Another measurement commonly used, especially in farm realms, is a bushel, and that is a volume measure for non-liquid products. This is really occasionally used in the food service industry. If you go to a local farmer's market, I just bit to this, and this is tomato season, so I just ordered a 1/2 bushel of tomatoes. And honestly, still, because bushel isn't used as often, I still had to visualize, and I had to look up, okay, how much is a 1/2 of a bushel? So I needed to make sure that I understood what I was ordering. So this is another requirement. So if you only have, so this is a 1/2 of a cup measure of a dry ingredient, and then this is its in weight. So we have a volume measure versus a weight measure. So sometimes when you're thinking, you're like, well, a full cup is, in liquids, a full cup is 8 ounces. So then a 1/2 a cup must equal 4 ounces when you're thinking about it. But liquid measuring and dry measuring are not equivalent. So weight versus volume. So this is a volume measure of a 1/2 a cup. So weighted, it's actually only 2.5 ounces. So it's less than 4 ounces. So if you can't always go by that standard, it's not interchangeable when thinking about liquids and solids. So this diagram I've actually used in my professional career, especially if we're starting out, when I have to visualize what's going on with conversions. So if you ever, and you can do this in your real life when we're doing a test or something, sometimes I like to just draw out a giant G. So this giant G stands for a gallon. So then within that G, if you drew 4 Q's, those Q's represent a quart. So there are 4 quarts in 1 gallon. And then you break it down even more. So within that quart, how many pints are there? And the P represents pint, so you put 2. So there's 2 pints in every quart. So then you keep going, so then it equals there's 8 pints in a gallon. So you can kind of keep it visualized and you can just go through and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. How many P's are within the G? And then it goes broken down even more. So we have 2 C's within the P. Those are equivalent to cups. So there are 2 cups in a pint. but there are 4 cups in a quart. And then it gets broken down even more, and we have 16 cups within a gallon. So without even having to do any math, you can visualize it and just simply count. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there are 8 cups in 2 quarts. So this is a really helpful diagram. I want you to burn this into memory as you go along. A bushel, again, so we're back into bushels. So there's bushels, there's pecks. So if anything, this is a quick little guide. So there are 4 pecks in a bushel, but there's also 8 gallons in a bushel. So I just ordered a half bushel of tomatoes, so I'm going to be getting 4 gallons of tomatoes. And that's it. So I think for this, and as we go along, I'm going to try to really pay attention to your quizzes and things like that, so I can kind of see where we're lacking and address it weekly, and we can focus on those things. Because we're not in class together and I'm letting you guys do this kind of on your own pace, I'm going to try to make sure that I see the red flags of where we need extra work on. So weekly, I'll try to do these videos, try to explain things in my own terms, but really, it's really important that you focus on your readings every week and kind of do a little bit of independent learning, just so we make sure that we're all on the same page and we're learning at the right pace. So that's it. This week, you guys have a little bit of a quiz, so go ahead and take that. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out.